Okay, hi Lois, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you doing?
I am great, Simon. Thanks so much for having me on.
Awesome. Now I'm excited to get into some really interesting parts of your work. So let's kick off with some background information. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into preventative healthcare?
Yeah, thanks. Well, Simon, I actually come from the business side. So I was in corporate business for most of my career. I traveled around the world, super busy, mother of adopted identical twins, and so kept a pretty busy lifestyle. Then in my 40s, I started to get sick. And I was exhausted. It didn't matter what I did, I couldn't seem to get my energy back. I had something called restless leg syndrome where things vibrate at night, and normally it always slept so well, and so that was alarming. I had very difficult periods, and so that was creating anemia for me. And probably the thing that worried me most was I couldn't get a full breath. I really struggled to breathe. And I had, you have to carve out the time to go to doctors. So I went to asthma specialist, respirologist, oncologist. I did a full body MRI thinking maybe I had cancer because we just couldn't find anything wrong. And this went on for 4 years and culminated with me going to the doctor just exhausted and discovering I had a zero iron count in my body, being admitted to hospital, and 2 days on blood transfusions with my husband out of town and a babysitter at home with my kids. So it was just that was a huge wake up call for me to say this can't go on, and yet I had tried to find solutions and couldn't find any solutions. As I was recovering, I ended up at my grandmother's 85th birthday, and I had a cousin who had gotten into DNA testing and ended up doing a DNA test to support her business and to learn about my adopted twins. And it was around preventative health and foods and how you can, just learn more about your unique body. And when I got the results back, expecting to learn about my twins, I discovered I have genetic weaknesses related to vitamin B's. Seems pretty simple. I thought, well, that's curious because at different times when I'd traveled, I'd taken a lot of vitamins and seemed to feel better and could breathe better, but I didn't believe in vitamins, never took them in general. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try that. And I just started taking vitamin B's every day. And within 2 to 4 weeks, all of these symptoms that I had fought with for 4 years that landed me in hospital had gone away. And I couldn't believe that it was as simple as my body was vitamin and nutrient deficient, and I needed just that extra support, almost like my pharmaceutical of choice is vitamins. That's what I need to be healthy. And let me just say, I'm a big believer in there is a natural medicine, an answer for everything. And I have been healthy ever since. And I thought if it's that easy to solve all these health problems, all the time I'd spent in the medical system where not one person suggested nutrition, and here suddenly all of those separate things that I'd been sent to different doctors for were just all connected, that my body couldn't get enough vitamin B to process the iron, to process the oxygen. And here it was that simple for me. Now it's not that simple for everybody, but I couldn't believe that that was the case. And I got involved with the DNA startup company and ended up buying the company and taking it over because I was just such a believer. So I left my corporate and business behind. I had studied health, and I have just been an absolute researcher and student of natural health ever since. And I know I am living healthier and will live longer than I ever would have without having made that change. So, huge believer in vitamins and what Truehope is doing because it truly, I've seen it change my life and the lives of so many of our clients.
That's wonderful. And I always find it so exhilarating when somebody shares that type of story about a big change in their life because those people now, like, where you are, and you're clearly super passionate. I can hear you, I can feel you vibrating about this story. And it's usually somebody going through a personal experience, like 4 years of trying to figure out what on earth is going on, and then finding, some really significant answers in a place that you probably didn't expect it. And then that just turns everything upside down, and it puts your whole life on this different trajectory. And I just always find that super interesting. And the idea that, you spent 4 years going to separate specialists that kind of focus on like one area of the body, and there's obviously a place and time for all of those things. But when you started to investigate your own specific, unique genetic components, that's when you can actually get so much more specific and kind of find those somewhat maybe hidden answers that you're looking for.
That's so true. Exactly, Simon. So, what is so interesting for us about DNA is that we're getting to your basic blueprint. So, what is the blueprint you were born with? And we all know we're born with different genetics. So, what was the collection of genetics that you received? And then, which of those might be the root cause for some of the issues that are showing up in your life or could show up in your life? So our body wants to be healthy. And so our body will do whatever it has to try to maintain that health. But as we age in particular, it starts getting a little bit harder and harder. And so more and more things pop up. And that's because our DNA is our base code, but it's impacted, so that's our genetics, but our life is impacted by our epigenetics. And epigenetics is basically, it's your lifestyle. And so it's the things I see in your blogs, which I love, Simon. You talked about, what are some of the basic things that support health? And it's things like food, water, and sleep. And it's things like, movement and music. I just love the things that you were bringing in your writing. So our body is impacted absolutely by food, exercise, sleep, stress, toxins, and the environment around us. And so when those get out of balance, or when we aren't doing those in alignment with our genetics, that's where we'll start to see problems. And so what's great about learning your DNA is you can find out in your blueprint and your roadmap, where are your potholes. And if you know where you've got a pothole, like, just stop driving into it, go around it, skip that spot. But the benefit is you don't have to bypass the entire road. You don't, it's so hard in this world we're living in to do everything right and to just eat clean and healthy. What we can do is kind of shortcut a few things and go, okay, here, Simon, and I've got your DNA. I actually know where your potholes are. We'll review those later. But I can say, here's your potholes, Simon. These are the ones you should avoid, because that will help you to stay healthier.
That's really cool. I've got a question in regards to, what do you say when somebody says to you, "Oh, it's just my genetics. I can't help it. It's got, it's just the way it is. My mum had it, or my dad had it, and my grandpa had it. What do you say to somebody like that? Because I think that we have a strong misunderstanding about what our genetics mean, and especially what our epigenetics mean, and that kind of like that dark matter of our DNA. Can you maybe talk a little bit about, like, maybe give us a foundational understanding of what DNA is, and then the epigenetic connection? So I think a lot of people have probably heard that word, but it gets a little bit sciencey for some people, and I know some of our listeners are probably very aware of what we're talking about. But if for those people who aren't quite with us, you think you could give us like a little bit of a 101?
Sure, for sure. Oh, and I love this. So, what's interesting is that, we all know we're made up of DNA. We all learned that in grade 9 science. And we understand it, but we don't know a lot about it. And when they sequenced the genome they started in 1993, in the 2000s it came out, we've learned, like, the curve on genetics in our learning has been like this. And so now this information, instead of costing 3 billion, it costs us like a few $100s now to know our own genetics. And our genetics, just like you have different hair color and eye color than I do, our genetics came from different parts of the world, and we inherited different genes for the areas that we lived in. And so, for example, those who came from Northern Europe have better genes for, meat and dairy, versus my kids who come from Asia don't have the alcohol and lactose genes. And so we inherit that, and what you want to be able to do is work with it. So to your point about, and we can look those up. So there's actually letters that change in the code. And so that's what we're testing for. When we go in, I test for about 200 plus specific areas related to preventative health. So what we focus on is the genes you can do something about. Because when you know that code and you focus on the genes that you can respond to, like food, and which foods are right for your body, that triggers your genes to respond, all of them, to behave well. Once you start going against your body and making unhealthy choices or things that don't align with your DNA, the poor genes start to present themselves because they've got nothing to support them, to keep them suppressed. It's a little bit like a light switch. You can some flip on and off, or a dimmer switch which goes up and down. Your epigenetics, your lifestyle affects how those genes will express themselves. And so if you are going against your DNA, suddenly that switch will go on and says, oh, I need to present some disease or some issue because there's too many bad things coming at me, and I need to find a way to stop this. And so once you get back into that homeostasis or that balance for your body, everything settles down. And so the great thing is, again, when you worry about, oh, my dad had it, my grandparents, they all had it, you probably have inherited that. But the important thing is you absolutely can do something about it. You absolutely, if you now respect the areas that your body has some weaknesses and you honor that and work around it, that's your pothole, work around it, you can live a long, healthy life. And I have to believe, Simon, that has to be everybody's goal. Is we want to live long and healthy lives. We want to be healthy in that last 10 years. And we're now in a society where chronic disease is overwhelming us and overwhelming our system and overwhelming, we've lost the path for natural true health. And we don't want to live that last 10 years in sickness or feeling, awful, or, who wants to die suddenly? But those are the things that occur. You want to be healthy right up until the end, and I believe that there is a path for that, and that a key portion of that path is know your genetics, and then you have to supplement. Our food supplies just do not have the nutrients in them any longer that they did 50 years ago to support what we need in our body. And so we now get sick because of deficiencies, which was my case. I was deficient in vitamins or toxicity, too much of something. And when that happens, your body's out of balance and it presents in very different ways. In one person, it might present as irritable gut. In another, it might be fatigue and depression. Our bodies, because we're such unique chemistry, it just presents in very different ways. And surprisingly, sometimes it can be the same toxin in an area. Like I'm working with one family, and they're in the prairies in Canada, and the family, one person had cancer, another one Parkinson's, another multiple sclerosis, and yet I think it's from the same toxins in the environment and the spraying and the chemicals that might have contributed to that. So you just need to detox that out, and then how do you supplement with really good nutrition?
That's wonderful. And I think that I've had the conversation in my own nutritional practice with my clients in regards to them believing or thinking that because their parents or their grandparents went through a particular situation, that's their destiny and there's nothing they can do about it. But I always bring up the conversation about how we inherit habits just as well as we inherit our genetics. So the way we eat, where we eat, how we eat, what we eat, all these things are obviously very, very, very important, and we obviously inherit those habits primarily from our parents and our siblings. And those are things that we're repeating through each generation, which is obviously a really important part. And I also find it really powerful when people actually get the results and this quantitative data that they can look at and say, okay, this is actually me, and there's actually some data here, rather than the type of subjective sensations that people might be feeling. Once they see those results and they've got them there and they've been explained by a health professional, then it gives them that little bit more motivation, I think, connection to their kind of internal world a little bit, starting that communication a bit.
I agree completely. So just because your family may have died or been affected by heart disease or chronic disease, you can absolutely work around that. But the problem is we don't know quite why they did. What we're trying to do is get under the surface and figure out why that might be the case. And then you truly can take action around that. You also mentioned we inherit habits. I got to tell you, I think that's the most fascinating part that has really come out in the last year is we thought everything you just inherited the code and everything else stripped off. We now know that epigenetic tags are inherited, and that there's I'm gonna throw a ballpark number of 20 to 30% of traits that came from your parents and grandparents and up through the line stay attached to the DNA and show up in your life, which is why you get in a family some kids who have the same athletic ability as the parents, or the same interests in gardening or sewing, or have the same issues of alcoholism and depression. So but it varies, because sometimes some kids do and sometimes some kids don't, which is a bit of the Truehope story. Some of those tags get inherited, but epigenetic tags are everything you talk about regeneration in your blogs. Everything is regenerative. Everything, you saw it in your dad's liver, coming back with the transplant. You can regenerate. Everything in your body can change. It's just once it's out of balance, it's harder and takes longer. So you need consistency and a belief in seeing it through, and that's what's so valuable with our results. When you see ours, they're in red and green. Green is good, red is watch out, and sometimes we just need to see it to feel confident and believe it. And that's what we're trying to do, is help people, give them the evidence of why a particular behavioral or habit change is so important.
Yeah, that simple green and red solution is really it gives it gives you a bit more motivation and a little bit more like value and energy around like trying to like make that change, whether it's to consume less dairy or coffee or whatever that might be. And
Exactly.
you're right that the science is really relatively new when it comes to, it's definitely epigenetics, but even genetics itself is a really new science, and the accessibility of being able to study it is again pretty new. And yeah, like there's some really interesting research and studies in regards to how we inherit ancestral trauma.
Hmm.
you
Yes.
know so it's, yeah, there's just some remarkable things out there, and there's so much that we have control of, that just given the right circumstances and the right information, and doing the right tests. Testing and not guessing is obviously very, very important, but you can get so much value with doing these things. And we're obviously working with that health professional to help translate a lot of the data, can really help yourself begin to educate yourself in regards to yourself and your body, and what you can and can't do to start feeling healthy and awesome. Because yeah, who doesn't want to feel fantastic every day and spring out of bed? I know in my mid-20s I wasn't like that, but I'm 37 now, and I'm probably in the best shape of my life. And yeah, I would not have been able to get there without l- learning, educating, and playing around with diet and things in my life.
Mhm. Exactly. I know that I will live 10 years longer and healthier at least, because of the path and the learning that I've been on, and just having this knowledge, and that feels good. I've never felt better and healthier in my life than I do now as well. And I would have to say, I mean, I'm going to come at some of the epigenetics as well, remembering it's not just food, exercise, it's also the exercise, the sleep, the stress. I did create a rebalance in my lifestyle and say, how do I move from being this hard driving, executive, on 20 boards and committees into creating in my mornings. I'm fortunate my kids are, they're old, they're in college now, so I don't have to get them to school in the morning anymore. But I try to get up earlier, and I spend 30 to 60 minutes in the morning where I start out with, I call it gift, gratitude, intention, forgiveness, and thoughtful action. And how do I just spend that quiet time in the morning and start my day with the way that I want my day to be, so that I can help create that. And then I do just a little bit of yoga. And honestly, I feel fantastic.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, starting your day with some sort of clear intention, with a set of elevated emotions, you'll you'd be very difficult not to have an awesome day if you
Mm-hmm.
started like that every day. That's
Yes.
wonderful. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the sample kits? So, I sent off a sample to dnaPower using the Total Power test kit, which I believe is 4 tests in one. Can you tell us a little bit about the test kits that you guys offer? Like, what are the more common ones? And yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is we've looked at all of the science that actually has been around over decades around specific genes. And rather than it existing in, labs and research, what we have spent, over a decade doing is compiling all of the most valuable documented scientific research on genes and which ones are linked to things such as weight issues or cardiovascular, or if you have these genes, you're more likely to have carbohydrate issues or vitamin issues. Those genes are pretty well studied, and that's what our work does, is bring them together. So we look at four areas: diet, fitness, health, which is underlying things like detoxification and hormones and inflammation, because those are so important, and brain wellness. So we have four areas. And in the one that we did with you, we usually recommend just do it all. If this is what you can learn about your body, just learn about all of it. And so you get results on 70 different areas, and it's green and red. And we'll see that when we look at your report, Simon. And where it's red, that's the stuff you focus on. That's where you've got some challenges, and that's your roadmap and your potholes to try and avoid. So we're looking at all of that. And then with our results, we always include either ensuring a nutritionist like yourself reviews the results with somebody, just because we want to be sure you really get the best value, or one of our nutritionists at dnaPower goes through the results with you to be sure you can understand how do you now convert where this is red. We give you a specific recommendation of how you can use food or other things to support your health. So it basically almost becomes a little bit like a shopping list. Here's the foods you need to add to your diet to support these areas of a bit of weakness, or supplements. And then we just want to be sure you can think about how to adjust your habits to support that.
Wonderful. So, in regards to the kind of the specific testing, you say that it's probably best to just kind of do all of them, because you can't um, be quite difficult to specify which one somebody should do. And it's we need to be taking, if we're going to look at like a holistic nature of looking at all the aspects that make up somebody's health, it's obviously very important to take all of those things into consideration. What do you think, why do you think people should really be interested in taking that on? Are there like any like real, like, is there a common thing people are looking to recover from, like whether that's a pathology, or are people just like interested to check out their genetics to do the testing kit as kind of like a fun funky thing to do? Or are people like, I'm in trouble, like I've tried everything under the sun, I've spent 4 years trying to figure out what's going on, and somebody comes across your website or gets recommended there, like what are kind of the common scenarios that someone finds you?
Well, in the early days, I think it was people who were curious and really liked working with data. But absolutely, the majority of our practice now is people who've got health issues and can't kind of get to the root of it. Like when you start to have gut issues, or you're feeling ill, or you're tired, or you're getting a chronic disease that's emerging, or you're dealing with pain or weight loss, it's just hard to know where to go. It's hard to do everything right. And so what we're trying to do is help you find what are some of the keys, the unique things and patterns for your body that might be the clues. For us, the starting point is diet. And so, there's so much in the news around keto diets, or high fat or low fat, and everyone, I mean, if people haven't heard about different diets or tried different diets, then, you're living in some beautiful little bubble somewhere. But when I hear people on various diets and, should I be on that? I always go, it depends. I can see clearly in your genes whether you've got the genes to process and metabolize carbohydrates or fats or proteins or vitamins or lactose or gluten. And so what you're doing is trying to see, is there a key that can help say where maybe over time your body has gotten out of balance, and there's something that's creating some inflammatory distress in your body that is now linking into, gee, I've got pain in this joint, or I've got a leaky gut. And so I can find in one person that they don't have, let's say they've got gluten issues that will show up. It can show up as psoriasis, it can show up as pain, it can show up as gut issues. It shows up differently in different people. So it's, if you go to the doctor, they may be giving you something for your skin, or it's a different approach for going through the medical side, which is again important. But can you find a clue for the underlying part? And that's what we're trying to do with this is a, have you got some issues, and can we give you some underlying information that might help you make this journey easier and faster? And then second, I really encourage this for parents. Like, our food supplies are so weak and we have so many toxins in our environment now, Simon. Our kids are starting out with hundreds of toxins in their body after they're born. Like, how can that be? And so our kids need every fighting chance you can give them, because they're living in a fairly toxic world now, including, electromagnetic and these, all of these energies that affect their body. In addition to, our water isn't as pure and clean from the earth. We're not getting the trace minerals. We've got mass produced food that may or may not have nutrients. So our kids are getting sicker sooner than we did in my generation. And I'm a generation ahead of you, where I still had some organic food. But I grew up in an orchard area in the Okanagan in Canada. And I ended up, it was when they started spraying chemicals. And so I've been fighting. I have non-cancerous lumps throughout my body, which I believe comes from all the spraying in the orchards that I was exposed to as a kid. I used to run through chemicals to get to school. But I'm fortunate because I know I don't have, I got really good cancer fighting genes. So this is why I have benign lumps in my body now. And actually they're reducing over time as I live a cleaner, healthier life. So that was a bit of a story within to say it's so important to support your kids as well. And if you have got health issues, for sure, why wouldn't you want to check for a few $100s if you can find some underlying causes?
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it's incredibly affordable. And I think, just in my experience of working with clients, that 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 people have got some sort of level of leaky gut, which is a primary root of most disease. And yeah, I think anybody can really benefit from getting, real specific in regards to what's working for them and what isn't.
Yes. So what I just want to mention, because on leaky gut, I believe most people have some leaky gut. I believe most people have nutritional deficiency, and mineral deficiencies. It's just the way our food supplies are now. And part of these things can be genetic or acquired. So you've inherited some weakness, or we acquire it. And part of the leaky gut is due to the fact that we have genetically modified so much of our grains in North America, and they don't fit our digestive system as well, and it creates some issues. So both can occur. And I'm just reinforcing that yes, leaky gut is a core issue, and sometimes we find the genetic reason for it, and sometimes it can just be the foods that we've been eating.
Absolutely. And obviously, the majority of us are coming from Europe ancestrally. And when we've GMO'd these crops, they're basically foreign organisms to what we would have, what our genetics is used to dealing with. So as you say about when our body is kind of constantly in this inflammatory state, it's never really going to be able to heal you and make you thrive if it's constantly having to deal with those significant side issues.
Exactly, exactly. I do, you asked a question earlier, I just want to reinforce, and they're over there, but I just want to say that what we're talking about is, it's just a cheek swab. It's like a fancy medical Q-tip that you rub on the inside of your cheeks. We mail it to your house and you mail it back, and everything's done, virtually. So this is an easy process, just in case people are wondering, how does this work? It's super easy to do, and non-invasive, and you don't need to go give blood or, cut out part of your cells to make this happen. So it's really easy.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. I had it done and ready to get sent in the mail in like 5 minutes. Instructions are super clear. It's a super easy process. And yeah, that was going to kind of be my next question in regards to what can people expect. But perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a really simple process. I had a question in regards to the like kind of security and protection of, because at the end of the day, I'm sending you my genetic information, which depending on your opinion, can be valuable. So I was interested in regards to like what type of security measures are in place for that.
Okay, first, what I want to say is when we're collecting the genetic material, when it goes to our lab, which is a top Canadian lab, super, it works with hospitals in all kinds of different areas. It's highest of standards. We only collect the 200 pieces of data that we need. You have 3 billion DNA codes, and we're only collecting and there's about 10 to 30 million that differ. So when the testing goes in, all we do is we target the specific spots we want to know which letters you have. So when I get that data, if anybody had that data other than running it through our sophisticated IT systems, it's virtually useless. And because we're not trying to clone you, Simon.
No,
So,
okay.
and we don't have the ability to do any of that. So I'm only collecting the few hundred pieces of tiny bits of letters that I need. And what anyone else could do with that, I have no idea. But your security is also important in that we destroy the genetic material after we've run our testing. The information that goes to the lab only has a barcode on it. Your name never goes to the place where this is processed. It's neutral. They don't take your data. Our commitment is we don't sell the data. So we're not in the business of that. We're in the business of preventative health. There are other companies out there where you do want to check if your data is being used. They say for research, but honestly, it's being sold for different purposes. That's why their tests are cheaper, because they're making their money off of selling your data. So we try to work as efficiently as we can to give you what we need, just what you need to learn exactly what can be helpful for you. So that's that side. The information is only available through us. We have double encrypted IT systems. I was in technology before, so all of the data is safe. And also there are genetic laws in place that nobody can discriminate against you for any genetic weaknesses. So if you discover you have carbohydrate genetic weakness, nobody, well, what is anyone going to do with that? But they still can't discriminate against you. So there's laws in place in Canada and the US for that.
Great, that's a perfect answer. I feel safe and secure with all of that. That's great, and I don't think the world could handle another one of me. So that's great. Don't clone me. Um, what are the more common health concerns that you see resolved with this type of exploratory testing?
Well, I'm going to say the first thing is that it's unique for everybody. So out of the 70 areas, I actually never quite know what I'm going to get, so it's hard to advise. But the things that we help with which which foods might be irritating you, and so therefore causes inflammation. And so the things that we deal with are weight, people who have weight gain and can't figure out how to lose the weight, pain, where is that source of that pain and inflammation, pain coming from? And then we know inflammation is toxic to our bodies. And once your body has an inflammatory response, it emerges through a leaky gut, through discomfort, through headaches, through colitis, celiac, IBD. I mean, those are some of the common ones. Psoriasis, eczema, asthma. So there's lots of things, but I would say the most common are dealing with weight, dealing with pain, and dealing with fatigue would be the three most common things we see coming from people, because most people, when we're nutrient deficient, will experience one of those things.
Wonderful. And you touched on this a little bit already, but what type of like ongoing support does DNA Power offer?
We generally will just provide you with the results, and then we will give you a nutritional consult. At any point, you can come back and work with one of our nutritionists. But we try to put this in your hands so that this is your responsibility. And go and work with your local coach or practitioner, whether it be a nutritionist or a fitness trainer, and give them this information to help work with your body. And if they don't understand it, I'm always happy for us to follow up with a call with them to help them understand it so that they can use it as well. But our belief is we want to put this and empower you to just know this. And really, most people leave with, here are the 5 to 10 things I need to know for my lifetime. And I always say, print out your summary results and action plan so that every now and then you pick it up and go, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to be yeah, I've been bad about taking my vitamins, or yeah, I've been cheating and having pizza, and I'm not good with carbs and gluten, and okay, I know better. And so we say just have that at your desk or your bedside to remind you. But we also encourage people to work with nutritionist practitioners like yourself.
Yeah, I think that's very important, and I think the information you've sent me in regards to my results really easy to follow. I mean, there's a lot of pages because there's a lot of information, but it's really easy to follow, and the recommendations are super clear. And I think just from my perspective in regards to working with someone to support you is to figure out how you can slowly bring these new changes into your life. I know that a lot of people who, let's take the diet industry for example. If you read about a new diet and you want to do it, you're making a lot of new changes into your already busy routine. And if you do that on such a high scale, you're kind of inevitably going to fail because it's very, very difficult to keep that up. So working with a coach or a nutritionist, so you can slowly start bringing these things in and figuring out what's working and working around your own circumstances and your own work schedule and everything. I think that's a really important place to gain some support as well. Well,
Yes, you'll see on our, it's interesting that we finally are starting to get longer term studies on nutrigenetics about how these impact. And so one of the ones we write about on our blogs is the DNA diet versus a keto diet. And over a 2 year study, people lost more weight on keto initially, but it's so hard to maintain that their recidivism, like falling back, was just way higher. So over 2 years, you had fewer changes but more consistent results because you were working with your body on a DNA diet versus keto or other diets.
yeah, I think you would see very similar results against any fad diet. Absolutely. And yeah, that's a really important point that you would feel and you get those type of results very, very quickly as you implement and you've got the motivation, but very, very difficult to keep up those things in the long term, especially when you've got decades of pre-existing subconscious habits working for you. Let's let's get into my results. Are you ready for that? We can do some screen
Totally.
sharing and see where I'm going wrong and see what I'm doing well as well. It's good to be
Fantastic.
positive.
Can't wait. So, for those who are listening audio, I'll try and talk you through the results. And for those who have the ability to see this on one of your channels that has video, you'll see the red and the green, but I'll talk some of that through. So, I'm going to share my screen here and pop up your results. Let me get this here. And we have a lot of information, as Simon says. We provide a summary report. It's still 18 pages, but we recommend print this one out because this gives you all the others information. You don't even need to go into the other 4 reports, but we like to provide that for background, just so if you want to dig into your specific areas, you can. So when we go into this, we tell you a little bit why DNA is important. Here's the 4 different reports we're going to walk through. And just to know that we have it set up in red and green, where green is normal and red is a variation. And the variation doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that's how your code is set up. So remember, when you get these results, it doesn't mean that you have an issue. It means this is an area you have a predisposition or a potential for an issue. And what we have learned through our clients over time is that as you age, these are where the areas, these are the areas that tend to pop up.
Okay.
Now, interesting in your results, Simon, you actually have really good genetics. It's some of the best results I've seen in a while, but you have 2 major potholes. You have 2 critical areas in your results that we're going to talk to. But I'm going to start here and first of all and show that actually Simon is one of those people that who can have any combination of diet and do well. It doesn't matter if you're on carbs, fats, proteins, you do well on a balanced diet. I see people who have very red in carbohydrates, and I know they should be on more of a keto diet, or they're very red in fats. I know then that they need to have a low fat diet in order to, a high quality low fat diet in order to be well. Or people who are very red in the proteins, and this one isn't particularly big for you, Simon. In protein, it's a little bit redder. It just means that more regular sources of protein throughout the day, plant-based, easily absorbable, are good for you. So it's good to have a little bit of seeds or nuts or other things just to keep your body absorbing protein on a regular basis. And so what happens is where it's red, we generate a recommendation on what you should be doing. And so that information will show up. But all of this information is great. Really, this is one of the best results I've seen in a while on how you manage your macronutrients in your diet. So that's your good news.
Great.
So we're going to move now into some of here's your first red flag. So when I pop onto this next page of food tolerances, you can see lactose is completely red. So the two critical genes that digest lactose, you did not inherit the ones that break this down, the genes that break it down through genetics. That means whenever you have lactose, so if you were a big dairy eater drinker, over time it is likely to convert into weight gain because your body isn't breaking it down efficiently, or into inflammation, which can lead to pain. And so it's not that you can't have lactose. What it means is that you need to have exceptional gut health to process that lactose, and or you need something else in your diet that helps to break it down in your gut so that it gets some help. So what I see for people in my generation who have this is that they got away with milk is because we were all, as Canadians, raised on lots of dairy and how much dairy you should have. But as you start hitting your 30s and your 40s, when I got my results, mine is about 50-50. I discovered that lactose, not only did the vitamin B's affect my hormones and how my body was working, but when I realized I needed to reduce the lactose in my diet, the two of those, I just suddenly dropped 10 pounds, which I didn't talk to you about. I was doing the 2 pounds a year gain in my 40s. And then once I realized, oh, okay, lactose is an issue, and I pulled that out, plus the vitamin B's, that rebalanced my body, and I ended up losing this 10 pounds that I had gained. So for you, Simon, tell me, are you much of a lactose? How much lactose is in your diet?
Not a lot. I mean, I might have a couple of small yogurts as like a kind of high fat meal that's a little bit later in the day where I don't really want to have a bunch of carbohydrates before I go to sleep. Other than that, it's pretty minimal. I don't consume a lot of cheese, but it's no, it's interesting because I've had periods in my life where I've consumed a lot of lactose, and I would definitely attribute that to some gut symptoms. But considering I don't consume much of it now, like I don't see when I do consume lactose in those kind of smaller quantities, and my body's got the ability to produce probably some lactase to take care of it. There's no problem. But I'm sure like if I was to do an experiment and like just go yogurt nuts for a couple of days, then I would feel those symptoms pretty quickly.
Yes. Well, what I wanted to comment about with yogurt is that yogurt isn't bad because it comes with its own bacteria. That's the whole benefit of yogurt, is it has its lactobacillus and other things that are great for your gut. So it can break itself down, and your gut needs some of those things in it. But if you are having a yogurt that is sweetened or has other stuff in it, you're going to be doing some different types of damage in the gut. So as long as you're eating a very wholesome, no sugar yogurt, your body, given your health, will be able to manage it.
Great.
So that's kind of your first big flag. You shouldn't be, like dairy should not be a big staple for you. And then the second, but yogurt is good. We need good gut health.
Yeah,
So I'm supportive of that.
you're right.
No issue with glutens, but remembering that North American grains are different than European grains. So we all have to be careful about gluten and in our diets in North America. So you don't have poor gluten genes, but if you're eating poor quality gluten or too much gluten, because our breads have like sometimes 5 times the amount in North America of Europe, you can create an issue. So that's an acquired issue sometimes for people's gut.
I have a quick question for you, Lois. So, say if I didn't know anything about nutrition and I did this test and I got these results back and I saw that my alcohol and caffeine was green, 100% good to go. I could see somebody looking at that and being like, all right, I can drink as much as I want and I can drink as much coffee as I want because my genetics are going to take care of it. What would you what would you say in response to that?
Everything in moderation.
Okay.
So, I still have my glasses of wine. I try to drink more organic, less treated wines with less nitrates. So we actually will use the places where we can make our own wine and have less in it. So, the great thing is the healthier you are, the more you can get away with some vices. With the alcohol one, you do if it's red, you have a higher link to disease that can create and we know anybody who drinks too much is going to be toxic on your body. It is toxic, and so a tiny little bit of super healthy alcohol can help with gut. Like that's how Northern Europeans, through beers and things help digest, but they weren't treated and preserved and there weren't chemicals in it in those days. So a little bit's okay. What this means when it's all green caffeine is that you process caffeine normally and you've got a normal metabolism. Interesting, if you look down here, you'll see you have a strong caffeine preference. Do you like caffeine?
I love having a couple of coffees a day. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's genes that actually indicate when you prefer things and how you taste foods. And you have one that is red in caffeine, which says first you metabolize it well, so you're okay, but you probably really like coffee. Mine are worse in that I'm half red on caffeine, and as soon as I have 2 cups of coffee, my body doesn't break it down, so the caffeine layers and I can't get it out and I am wired. So I have to limit myself to 1 cup. It's funny, when I was in corporate, I used to drink all of this coffee all day because I would be so exhausted from these other health issues. And then I would be so stressed. And once I realized the caffeine, I didn't realize the caffeine was causing this tension in my body and actually contributing to my heart palpitations and my stress. And when you see the results, you go, oh, well, that was obvious. How come I couldn't have figured out that caffeine was my problem? But it's so funny how we sometimes miss the obvious. So
Absolutely.
salt, you want to be a bit careful about because we're going to see your other big red flag later in your report. And there's a little bit of some red flags on stroke and cardiovascular. And so you want to just be careful of only having high quality mineralized salts. Never buy table salt, pretty much for anybody. Only buy the salt that has these beautiful, rich sea or other minerals in it that can provide some things that our body might need, and use it more sparingly for you,
Okay.
Simon. And I see you've also potentially have got a risk for higher sugar cravings. Once a person gets really healthy and their gut is healthy, they don't crave as much. Do you like sugar?
Well, I do. I used to have a lot of sweets when I was a kid, and even in my early 20s, and it's actually something that I've significantly cut out over the past couple of months, literally zero.
Right.
So I have this super craving for it. So it's something I have to be really conscious and aware of, because quite clearly my genetics want me to consume sugar.
You have genetics that have got variations that like to consume sugar. That had a purpose way back in our ancestry, where we needed to seek out the berries and the things to provide the sugar. Now we have an overload of sugar and fats in our diet. So there's a history to these genetic variations that probably helped our ancestors survive, and that's why they're here. We just live in a completely different environment now, and most of us are a potpourri now of genetics from different areas and cultures, and so that's why this is so useful to figure out.
Interesting.
So most of your tastes are normal. It's interesting here. Do you like salt? Because your salt taste is not as high. And so sometimes when people can't taste it, they want more. Plus, you have a little bit of a desire for salt. So anyway, I'll just flag that for you.
Okay.
You should just be a little bit careful about it.
Thank you.
And then moving into the last area in this report is vitamins. Now, your vitamins are again not bad, but as you can see, it's around 20 to 30%, 40% for all of the vitamins, which means it doesn't flag in the recommendations. They flag at 50%. I should say that most people's reports are a third red. Yours are less than that, which is, again, just you inherited some good stuff there. So when I see a report like this, Simon, where it's just a bit red, I say, you know what, take a multi. And I actually believe everybody should take a multi. But if you take a multi, the areas where you've got a few genetic weaknesses in absorbing those particular vitamins, it just needs a little bit more support. And you can see here your B6, it's a single vitamin, so it kind of over reports this one a bit, but it just means watch out in these areas. Your methylation is not bad in your Bs. But as we age, most people need a bit more vitamin B, particularly women. As soon as they hit their 40s, we don't absorb and process as much Bs as we need. So most women, once they hit perimenopause, should be taking a complex vitamin B supplement. So that's an important just piece to know. And for kids who are having issues, I just recommend get your kids on some vitamins. Make sure if it's chewy, it doesn't have too much sugar. Try and get something natural like a stevia or something in it. But in general, again, very good results here, Simon. So
All right.
your red flag is definitely lactose, and just be a wee bit careful with salt, and perhaps take a multi. So when I go into your action plan, we had protein was half red, so it just says you might want to add a little bit. Here's a direct recommendation: consider eating smaller, more frequent amounts of proteins, which are easier for your body to digest, including plant-based proteins such as beans, lentils, peas, quinoa, fish, cottage cheese, eggs, maybe some protein powders, nuts, seeds, and sea vegetables. So we try and give you a whole bunch of food suggestions so that something in there might resonate with you that you could add to your diet. So what I have that one. I love this, I love those trail mixes. And so I'll have that by my desk, and I'll just snack a bit more on seeds and nuts during the day to just get a little bit more of protein throughout the day. I do some intermittent fasting, so I'll try and do that just in the afternoon while I'm working.
That's great. Yeah, I've done a diet that basically where it says the protein need there and the kind of the smaller, more frequent portions of protein. I've done diets that have been like based around that concept, and I had more energy than I knew what to do with once I was doing that, and I definitely slacked off on that in the last couple of years. But again, like seeing that there and then resonating with the things I've had in my history, I'm like, okay, that's just given me so much more motivation to do that practically now, and it's in my conscious thought now, which is really great.
Exactly. And that's where I say print these pages out and physically have them to remind, I should do a bit more protein. Yes, lactose, watch what I'm having, only have good quality. Watch my salt and watch my sugar. Like that's your roadmap right there, Simon. That is your lifetime genetic roadmap to support your DNA and be working with it, not against it.
So if somebody had more, more red on being on kind of the other side of the spectrum, there would be, a much bigger action plan.
Correct. They'll just have a lot more actions. And you'll see that in a couple of other areas in your report where there's a little bit more. And when we go to vitamins, you only have one. Normally, I see people have quite a lot more in these areas that they should be focused on. But, we say B6 in general. I would say, Simon, once you hit your 40s, you might want to think about a bit more vitamin B. It does help the energy, the cell. There's so many things that helps balance. And for women in particular, I usually recommend. So someone who's under a lot of stress burns Bs, and somebody who is women moving into perimenopause have just need a bit more B support.
Would you recommend taking that as a complex or specifically B6?
Do you know, I've learned over time from me, it's funny, I mentioned I'm an adoptive parent. I couldn't conceive, and I now know from my genetics that my problem is B9, folate, folic acid, and I need probably 4 times the amount of folic acid of others. Actually, B12 isn't my issue. So I take a complex B some of the time, because just to supplement a number of areas, but I can get overloaded on B12 if I take a complex all the time. I try and focus, I've got a methylated, here's one of my methylated methylfolates, which is this B9, and B6 is a bit of an issue. So I need the precursors. I need the 269, which triggers the 12, which triggers the iron, which supports my oxygen. So I know through my genetics here, but I've learned over time that I just need extra more B9 than the others.
All right.
And you can see here, you just need to put a little bit more of, spinach, bell peppers, cauliflower, walnuts, cereals, bananas, sweet potatoes, sunflower seeds in your diet, and you'll boost this B6 piece that you need.
Yeah, that's great to have. Obviously a supplement option as well, but the array of different vital nutrients that come with consuming whole foods is very, very powerful.
It's always more bioavailable to us when we eat it as a real food, but I maintain that we just aren't getting it in our foods, which is why I love what Truehope is doing with all of its different line, because they have over time looked to see which areas can we see that mental health or affecting, and we are missing trace minerals, we're missing certain things, and we know that manifests in certain chronic disease. So I really am impressed with some of the research that you've done in those areas.
Yeah, we basically released each product on the premise that we've seen a big gap, not necessarily in the market, but we've quite clearly seen that there are people are struggling in these areas, and we need really good quality, well sourced, well researched, bioavailable products, and that's basically the catalyst for every single one of our products.
I can see that for our clients that there's places that they need the support. So I love when I see high quality products. I tend to prefer, you can go to use some of the drugstore brands, the ones that are just on the shelf, but really you just want to do some research on getting the best quality support that you can for vitamins and minerals. And if you've got a specific issue that's already manifesting, then look for targeted products like Truehope makes. And honestly, there's so much about mental wellness we didn't even get into. I'll show you, there's a few genes in here that are linked directly to Alzheimer's and dementia. Again, you don't have them. You've got the normal profile, Simon, but about 25% of people we see, I can tell when they've got it's called the APOE genes linked to cardiovascular cholesterol issues, plaquing in the body and in the brain. And they just have to shift their diet. And diet absolutely can be the answer. Alzheimer's, we now know, is more like diabetes 3, and you can manage it and the outcomes just through a different sort of diet. Your body just needs a different diet.
Very
So
cool.
in Health Power, we're looking at detoxification and hormone health. Your detoxification genes are not bad. So when I go back and look at the genes right at the back, and I look where could there be some poor genes that are affecting, even though it's 50-50 on a couple of these, it's not that bad. So this is pretty good for what I see on detoxification. But interesting, on hormone health, you have more red, which means you have to be more careful in your food sources, because if you are having dairy or meat that has hormones or antibiotics, your body does not regulate it or eliminate it as easily. So if you now add that into your body, you've got weaker genes to support managing that, and you could be getting a little bit of a hormone imbalance. We see this more so for women who are on the pill or who are adding extra hormones in their body. If their genes are poor here, they have to be careful that it doesn't affect their fertility or affect a buildup of estrogens or metabolites in their body that could lead to some sort of a cancer or difficulties with terrible periods and other things. So it's just, when I see it's a bit redder here, if you were a woman, I'd be saying be very careful about your types of how you manage your birth control or fertility. And in your case here, the recommendations, and we'll flip to them, will be around what you need to do is just have hormone-free meat and dairy, produce full of herbicides, pesticides, and other chemicals, because those don't work through your body quite as well, and it can throw your hormones off.
That's fascinating. I've got a question in regards to, say, I send my sample off, I get this awesome action plan, then I spend maybe like 6 months, going through my recommendations. If I did another test, would my results be different?
They will not. So that's the
There
great
you
thing
go.
about this test. You only
Yeah.
do it once. The testing that currently is available, has previously been available to us, has been blood tests, and your blood is different. It can be different. Your vitamin B will test different if you've had a banana, because it's a point in time. And so the great thing with the blood results is it can show you some markers in some specific areas over time. Your stool, trying to see if you're missing certain gut bacteria, those are improving to give us more information. You can do some urine tests for hormones, and that can help. But those are all points in time, and they tell you if your body is in or out of balance now. I can't tell you that. All I can tell you is, here, Simon, this is your body's blueprint and roadmap. And these are the areas you are more likely to have issues in. And specifically, these are the areas you're more likely to have issues in. But I cannot tell you if it's better or worse for you right now. And you don't have to do this test again. It will not change.
Yeah, that's why I think that's so incredibly valuable. I've done a lot of gut testing with multiple companies, primarily Viome. And when I've got my clients' initial results, and we kind of look at where they're at, primarily with their diversity of microbial species, and then we we get into a program for sometimes 3 or even 6 months or even 12 months in some cases, and then we test again and they can see the results of their efforts. So powerful, so helpful. But what's really cool about this is, this is purely looking at my genetic structure and letting me know like what works for me and what doesn't. And this is a really, really helpful summary of me.
It is. So here's, again. So I'm going to just flip through. We're going to go through the rest pretty quickly. You have a little bit of extra red here on inflammation. It's not at that 50% point, but you should be aware that when you're eating things that don't agree with your body, you will have some immune and inflammatory response. You have decent cancer fighting, tumor genes here. It's not bad, but you don't want to be abusing your body because a few of the weaker ones can pop up, but in general, it's pretty good. And this process called methylation is really just how well your cells can use the energy and take the nutrients and use them as they should. And B12 is an essential process. We put this in here because lots of naturopaths like to have this methylation information. Yours are 50-50 for the most part because we're just testing a single gene, and it's not bad. A little bit of support occasionally. It just shows that occasionally some B12 might be useful for you. This is not an area I'm particularly worried in, but it does give you, as you can see, recommendations for all of it. And basically it says you need some B12 in your diet, perhaps, eggs, some seafood, nutritional yeast, maybe grass-fed, meat or dairy. In your case, no dairy. And otherwise use a methylated B vitamin complex. And so it really is similar across all of that, or some dark leafy greens, some folates into your diet. So that's really what it's saying here.
Great.
You'll see, yeah, so those are just, you get lots of some food recommendations in there as well. So I'm going to move now quickly into the last couple of areas. Fitness. So what does this tell us about your fitness genes? In the first area, endurance and power are mutually exclusive. So because when one is greener, the other one is going to be redder. And this says you have a slight preference probably for endurance type of activities, so swimming, biking, yoga, hiking, etc., than going to the gym and being a power lifter or sprinting and doing, these super athletic classes. Likely it's somewhat balanced, but you probably prefer a bit of endurance. What do you do for exercise?
That's exactly right. I prefer playing soccer and running around and doing these more endurance activities rather than, yeah, I'm not a big gym fan to be honest.
And
So yeah,
that's how your body is built. And so if people are working with personal trainers, you use this information to say, this is how my body responds and gets faster and better results. It's not that you can't do the power, it's just going to take more out of you because your genes aren't set up for it. So looking at injury and recovery, great genes here. A little bit of care on your tendons over time, just because there's a couple of genes that could be in trouble, but your ligaments, muscles, muscle repair, all good. Exercise performance, also good. Good blood pressure, energy availability, metabolism, and oxygen. These are great. Again, well set up. But now we're going to the next page, and we've got one of your red flags again. There are two genes that we look at that are linked to stroke, and you have those markers. That is not all that's linked to stroke. All it means is, you want to be more careful in this area, Simon, and so this is just your motivation that exercise will help mediate your stroke risk. And same, there's a little bit here on cardiovascular health. So exercise is just going to be great for you. But you don't want to be crazy and decide, well, I'm going to go and run an Ironman now without having checked your body out first. So if you're a personal trainer using these results with your client and you see this, you just want to be sure that you've looked after some basic health things first, checked the record of the family to see is there anything there, and just make sure that it won't flag. So should you be worried? No. Should you use this as a caution? Yes.
wonderful.
Great. And so we give a little bit of recommendations there. Just, aerobic activity should be moderate. Don't go and kill yourself. Or if you do, be sure you're under the care of a physician to do that. Limit alcohol and sodium. Great. And then finally, we go into brain. I did talk about this already, where we do test for Alzheimer's because we believe that so much of the brain and the mental health is linked to diet and exercise and other things. So we try to test some of the genes that are related to that and give you some insight. So if you have high Alzheimer's, we know you need to be on a high quality fat, not saturated fat diet, and that we can do some things to adjust your diet to make sure you're working and supporting what your body needs. When I look at this one and I see that's high for Alzheimer's concussion because they're linked. For anyone who's got kids, I say be really careful about your kids in any sort of contact sports. And if your child has those APOE genes and gets a concussion, you need to seek immediate help. And our system is not very sophisticated yet on supporting concussion. I know you've got some phenomenal stuff. You need supplements immediately that increase the flow to the brain. Things like lion's mane and things I've seen in some of your supplements at Truehope. Those are so important for rejuvenating and recovering the brain, getting the rest so it can clear the plaques out. Because what happens is when you've got the plaquing gene and you have trauma to the brain, it plaques and it can't get rid of the plaques out of that area, and it builds up and it creates more damage over time. So you're trying to do things that create the brain flow, the blood flow, the brain neuro regenerating. So now back to the DNA. Not your problem. You will respond normally on these, Simon. But I know I have clients where we really put a different program in place because we learned that. Here, your cortisol is good, depression genes are good, emotional eating is good, Parkinson's good. All of those things are great. Not an area of worry for you. But I don't know until I test your genes about whether it is something that you should be focused on. So that's kind of the big run through. We've got, your recommendations. You have a few pages, I'd say, print out on this report so that you can remind yourself. And that's kind of your run through. So Simon, I always ask people, what are your takeaways? What do you have to remember for your unique genetics?
I certainly have to be very cautious of lactose and primarily salt, I suppose. And I should be working with my genetics in regards to my exercise regime as well, because it's obviously going to support the stroke factor, I suppose. But I'm really looking forward to printing that off and really going through that with a fine tooth comb. And I'm sure my brothers in Europe will be interested to listen to this, and I'm sure they're going to have. I'll be interested to see what their results would look like in comparison to a sibling.
Mhm.
But I think just like even though my results are decent and pretty good, I definitely have work to do, and I have things I need to be conscious of and be aware of because we all get busy and stressed at times. So it's important that we work with our genetic factors and work with what we've been given. So yeah, I really appreciate you going through that with me. That was really, really eye opening and fascinating, and I'm sure this is going to inspire a lot of people to delve a little bit deeper into their makeup.
So we do have an offer for your clients. So we do have a $50 off. The test Canadian is $4.99. That includes 45 minutes with a nutritionist. But we wanted to give you $50 off for anybody who's listened to this podcast. Just put True Hope in the coupon or promo code area, and you can get some discount. To encourage you to consider learning about your genetics. And again, as we say, the great thing is you do it once. And I love what you're doing with True Hope with your supplements, because we see that when there is issues, it's often linked to some deficiencies or toxicity. And what we can do with these minerals and vitamins is help to supplant that so that our body then has the nutrients it needs to stay and be healthy.
Wonderful, yeah. And I'm going to put all the information in regards to that coupon code and how you can connect with Lois. But do you want, where is the best place for people to connect with you and your work?
Well, you can come to our website, dnaPower.com. We're going to give you actually a link that shows us that people listen to this podcast and helps just to identify to make sure that they can put in that coupon code for the True Hope and get the discount if they're interested. We're supporters. If finances are an issue, you can use dnaPower. It's $2.99, so that saves you some money. But we don't have a consultation with that. But sometimes that's a starting point for people where I know money is an issue. We try to do fair value for people. So again, we don't sell your data. We keep everything private. So we try to do it at a rate that we can cover our costs, because genetic testing is expensive, but give you great value that you can use to live a healthier life.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'll make sure all that information is in our show notes, and I really inspire people to really consider taking these tests on, because just going through them and looking at the results, you really actually get this, it's quite a new and interesting sensation of being connected to my genetics and connected to the inside world, because obviously can't see what's going on, but if I've got some data that's, you know, connecting me closer to that, it's going to really inspire me to you know, take control of my health. And I'm getting, you know, getting closer towards 40, and I want to be running around with my grandkids at 80 years old, and that's a big motivation for me personally to be doing all of these things. So yeah, I certainly inspire people to get involved in that. But thank you so much again for joining us, Lois. I really appreciate your time today.
Delighted, and thanks. Keep doing the great work that you're doing, and encouraging people to live as healthy and natural life as they can.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. Yeah. And any information we've spoken about in this episode will be in our show notes. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. This is True Hope Cast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. We will see you next week.